Conniff Tabor, and it is my
is a city where history is not preserved behind the glass. It is reinterpreted, contested. But Milano has always worked as a true open platform, shaped by its artists, and I see artists, designers, people of the cultural and artistic community of our city, institutions, and a network of collaboration that grows more international with every passing year, year by year. Milano Art Week is a direct expression of the spirit, a moment that has grown a lot during the last 4 or 5 years. I want to state it because I see also people from the art world, galleries, and cultural and public and private institutions that make it grow in a very relevant way. And it is a moment where the city concentrates its energies opens its doors and enters into the dialogue with a global audience. And Art for Tomorrow Talks is one of the most authoritative means through which we can realize this aspect of the international dialogue on art and culture. Art and design in Milan have never been separate words, as we know. So it is also basically a moment through which art, the Art Week, and the Design Week in a few days, dialogue continuously with never-ending proposals of exhibitions, talks, and initiatives on art and design. They have grown side by side, shaped each other, and together contributed to a cultural identity that is still very much in the making. I want also to mention what will be, and is mentioned here as a keynote conversation, and I want to give a very warm welcome and a round of applause to Otobongn Kanga. She's here with us. Thank you, Otobongn. Her talk, we know Otobongn, we know each other since last years and last times, and I'm very happy that Farah Nayeri from the New York Times will be the person who will be moderating this relevant cultural moment here at the Aquario di Milano. So thank you all. I'm really enthusiastic and happy to have made it possible with you, and I hope that for our international audience it will be a very good moment of conversation and of cultural contribution to the city of Milano. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tommaso. And I'm just going to say a few very brief words because I know you're eager to get on to our illustrious panel here. So as I said earlier, I'm Kim Conniff-Tabor. I'm the editorial director of the Democracy and Culture Foundation. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the foundation that I work for and the connection between art, journalism, and especially Milan. So Art for Tomorrow began as a New York Times conference about 12 years ago, bringing together artists, gallerists, museum directors, and deep thinkers with New York Times journalists like Farah to analyze how art and society interact. About 6 years ago, AFT became part of an independent foundation to pursue and nurture some of the ideas that were conceived at the conference and other events and turn them into active projects. We also added more diverse voices, more emerging artists, performing artists, more civil society, a few activists thrown in there. But then we also always had journalism at the core of what we do, and hence our continued relationship with the New York Times through the moderators that come. We run a special report in the New York Times every year in our main conference. But meanwhile, we also evolved to focus more on the capacity of the arts and culture to drive social change. And this remains a constant theme throughout the event for the past 6 years. This culminated in our relationship with Milan. We brought our talks to Milano Art Week last year, and then also our 3-day conference to Triennale, thanks to Stefano Boeri and the relationship with his wonderful staff. And the theme of the exhibition, as I'm sure most of you know, was inequalities. And that coincided very well with our own theme of overcoming together. That event wouldn't have been possible without our partnership with Milano and Partners. And a highlight among many of that event was the conversation between Farah and Jeff Koons at the Teatro Lirico last year, which was open to the public. And that was thanks to our relationship with the municipality. Well, thanks to the municipality and opening up that space to us. We also launched the Creativity for Social Change Award with the Moleskine Foundation. A couple of our friends from Moleskine are here today. And the first prize went to the amazing Angolan artist Kiloanji Kiahenda. So we hope to return. We will return every year for these talks, but we also would love to come back with the bigger conference to Triennale, we hope, maybe every 3 years. So, maybe whisper a little, like what you see today, maybe in the ear of Stefano and others here with power, because we'd love to see that happen, Ilaria, as well. And I just want to say a very few words of thanks to the people that helped make this happen, our sponsors, everybody at Milano Art Week, Gian Maria, Ilaria, my colleague Tulia, Fiorenza, Rebecca, everybody who we worked closely with the past weeks to make this happen. Thank you so much, and of course, Tommaso. So without further ado, I'd love to turn it over now to my esteemed colleague, Farah Nayeri, who will lead us through our 2 sessions. Take it away, Farah.
Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here with us at these Art for Tomorrow talks in Milano. Grazie della vostra presenza. Benvenuti. Yes, I speak your language. I'm very proud to. Sorry, I wasn't fishing for compliments. I just wanted to wish you a warm welcome. And I wanted to thank Tommaso Sacchi for your kind words of introduction, Kim Conniff-Tabor for her kind words of introduction. My name is Farah Nayeri. If you're wondering where that strange name is from, I'm from Iran. I am one of those Iranian women, except that I'm outside the country, not inside. Sorry, I wasn't fishing for compliments. I write on culture for the New York Times, and I'm also a writer of nonfiction, and I have a podcast. So if you look up my name, you'll see there's a podcast. I had the immense pleasure of living in Italy a few years ago. I lived in Rome. However, I have to say that I have boundless, limitless love for every corner of this country, including Milan, and I have many dear Italian friends, some of whom are here tonight, and thank you so much. As Kim was saying, a decade ago, roughly, the New York Times launched these Art for Tomorrow talks, focusing on art, architecture, design, culture, and they're held more every year in a different city. Last year we were in Milan. We were the guests of Stefano Boeri at the Triennale. It was a really fantastic, I'm not just saying that to make you feel better, it was really a fantastic edition. And we've also been to Florence, we've been to Venice, Berlin, Athens, Doha, and later this year, there's a book that's being published, which I had the pleasure of writing, looking back on these 10 years, first 10 years of Art for Tomorrow. Today I have the pleasure of presenting 2 Art for Tomorrow talks, which you see above you there. And the first one is about the boundaries between art and design. And very momentarily, I am going to turn to my first speaker, Stefano. But I just wanted to basically describe to you what the premise of this first discussion is. The boundaries of art and design are becoming more and more confused, more and more blurry. What is art? What is design? We can't really tell anymore. We have artists making, acting more and more like fashion designers, creating lines of handbags, sneakers, t-shirts for luxury brands, fashion brands. Meanwhile, we have designers who are creating objects that have no purpose, that are beautiful, collectible objects existing in very small editions, as if they were sculptures. Like, for instance, to name someone I'm deeply fond of, Zaha Hadid, a table by Zaha Hadid, costs hundreds of thousands of pounds. And, that's the cost of a work of contemporary art. And yet it's a design table. So is this overlap of art and design, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is it in between? That's what I'm going to ask my very, very brilliant panel here. They're all sitting like very nice school children on these benches, waiting for their turn to speak. But before we start, just a very quick story, and hopefully you will find it slightly amusing. A couple of years ago, I pitched to my editors of the New York Times. I said, I'd like to do a story about the overlap of art and fashion, art and design, brands, luxury. What does it all mean? And so they said, fine. And I did a story, and the piece opened with this striking example, which you see here. This was a sculpture. It's nearly 3.5 meters tall that looked like something out of a comic strip. It's a luxury handbag by Levine, that you see in the sculpture, perched on these skinny legs, and high-end sneakers are also on the sculpture. And the work was by the Austrian artist Erwin Wurm. Erwin Wurm is not a designer or a fashion or luxury brand designer or product designer. He's an artist. And can I ask you please to keep conversation to an absolute minimum? When I interviewed him about it, he said that this was called Desire. So this is a sculpture. This is a work of art. It's not a work of luxury product placement. And when I interviewed him, he said he accepted this commission because it fit into this series that he started before, which was called the Walking Bag Sculptures. They were basically handbags on legs. So he had already created this series, just anonymous series, and then Lanvin came and said, please, can you do one with our handbag? And he said, okay. And so I said, he said, it might seem like he was working for a brand, luxury brand, which can be dangerous or can be good, he said, but he was willing to take the risk. So the sculpture, I hope, raises questions in your mind about the boundaries between, art and design. Is this a sculpture? Is this product placement? Just think about it. Meanwhile, I'm going to turn to someone a lot smarter than me on these matters. The preeminent Italian architect and urban planner Stefano Boeri, who you all know here, is the president of the Triennale. Stefano, you're still the president of the Triennale this evening. Stefano, I'm going to hand you the microphone. I would like you, if it's okay, to define what is art and what is design. Sorry. In 2 minutes. And tell us what you think of this overlap between art and design.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for inviting me. Well, I can only try to answer considering a joke, my answer. I'm used, and I think basically we are used to walk on the edge, on the border between these two spheres, and basically I think that as you were saying, the fact that the border are blurring is not necessarily a positive result of a contemporary condition. I believe that what we should do today it's a little bit to try to underline what makes art and design part of a kind of common sphere, but at the same time to try to describe the diversities. First, one thing that makes these two spheres really part of the common sphere is going back to Bruno Latour's concept of ANT, so actor network theory. The result of both the process of creativity are objects, spaces, that came for a very complex system of relations. So it's true that in one furniture, in one building, in an art piece, we can observe not simply the projection of an author, but also a complexity of relation that comes from the relation that the author had in the past, the way he was using different materials, the way he was at a certain moment combining different materials in a unique individual object, and so on. But if we a little bit go ahead, immediately we can observe the differences. And the first difference is, which is for me very clear, that design is not about scales or destination. Design, let's say design, more in abstract, has always, let's say, a kind of functional destination. So
has a function.
Yeah. Then, in my opinion, it has also to enter in the symbolic sphere. So I consider good design the design that is capable to, let's say, walk on the border of the two elements, the functional one and the symbolic. But the relation between the two is a logical sequence. So you can, let's say, observe if some designer is capable to cross this border between, let's say, functional and symbolic using irony. Sometimes is using a paradoxical approach. This is typical of our culture of design. Sometimes it's using discontinuity as a good way to, let's say, interact between the two, but it's always logical process.
What about art?
Art
What is art?
In my opinion, art has nothing to do with logic. Art is something that produces effects that it's really, say, useless to combine following a linear deductive sequence, a logical process. And this is so important for me, and this explains why in our field, in the design field, sometimes happens that a design piece becomes art. It's very rare, and it's unintentional. So honestly, if I also consider my colleagues or basically the designers that I know, so with some exception, and that maybe we have the time to talk about the exception, the result of design process sometimes become part of the art sphere when they become, well, it's completely unintentional process.
So if a work of design becomes a work of art, that's totally unintentional.
Absolutely.
And that was
if
not...
Just example, if I think to something produced by Enzo Mari. No?
Enzo Mari, yeah.
Yes, maybe it's a unique designer that I also consider an artist in the history of the last century. No doubt on that. No doubt.
Sorry to... Tim, if I may, could you kindly, Stefano, hand the microphone to Tim. Tim, you are kind of special case in many more ways than one, of course. But you are now the director of the Design Museum in London, but previously you were the artistic director of the Royal Academy of Arts, where you put on an unbelievable array of exhibitions of artists, visual artists, from Ai Weiwei to Francis Bacon to Jasper Johns to abstract expressionists. You were giving me the list earlier. It was quite a list. So you kind of like made the transition from art to design, and I wanted to basically ask you what you think, you know, because, yeah, anyway, I'd like to hear your views as you expressed them to me in that email.
It's overstated. There have been moments in history where art and design have been much closer and moments where they're not. The Bauhaus espoused that. The whole idea of the Russian Revolution, Russian constructivism, we did an exhibition where art, architecture and design sit well together. The great modernist museums, the museums of modern art in New York and the Pompidou in Paris, have art, design and architecture as coexisting. But they're clearly different. And I mean, I think Stefano is absolutely right. I mean, as you said, when a work of design, if it becomes a work of art, it's not intentional. Well, it is if Marcel Duchamp declares a urinal as a work of art, but it wasn't the intention of the designer of the urinal or the bottle rack to make it a work of art. And I think that we get hung up with categories. I think a lot of creative people feel quite liberated to be able to move betwixt and between disciplines. But you gave the example of Zaha Hadid's table. It's not a work of art, it's a table. You said it's a sculpture. No, it's not. And Zaha worked as an artist. She produced drawings in service of her architecture. She produced drawings for their own sake. She produced paintings, sometimes in service of architecture, sometimes not. And in their intent, it's clear whether they're studies for design or whether they're works of art. And I love the fact that we as cultural commentators, curators, journalists, critics, more, I think, want to define, but it's not that difficult. I mean, the great Armando Testa from this city was trained as an artist, studied with Pistoletto. Pistoletto was one of his students, was one of the great advertising designers, graphic designers, advertising designers of the second half of the 20th century, was also an artist, worked as an artist separately, as it were, produced paintings. The visual language that Testa used in his advertising The more you look at his paintings, you understand there's a great sense of composition. But he didn't say his advertising was art, nor did he say his paintings were design. He knew the difference, and so do we, really. And artists who want to play with boundary blurring, that's interesting, it's ironic, it's game playing. Pop art did it 50 years ago. So I'm not undermining the debate, but I think it's really overstated.
Well, except that you say it's all in the intention, right? Zaha Hadid was someone I knew well, as did you, Stefano. Interviewed her many times, and it's true that she didn't consider those extremely beautiful paintings and drawings that she produced as art. And yet you speak to Hans-Ulrich Obrist of the Serpentine and Julia Peyton-Jones, formerly of the Serpentine. I had them in a debate in London recently, and they say Zaha was an artist. Do you know, so even if Zaha's intention was not to make art, but isn't the product of what Zaha makes or what a great designer makes. Let's say we have a designer, maybe even in this room, who goes off tomorrow and makes a shape out of glass, let's say. And it is a particular shape, and it looks very sculptural. And this designer says, well, I just made a work of design, and I'm going to use it, sort of put it and display it in a fair or in a boutique as a kind of collectible or a bauble or, you know, an objet d'art or something for furniture to put in your house.
No, but that doesn't make it art. And
Okay.
Julia and Hans Ulrich may well say that she's an artist. I think she was an artist, but her tables are not art and her buildings are not art. You can be an artist, but not everything you produce is art. And I think, again, what's interesting is that it's status obsession. So design on one level is dismissed as mere functionalism. On another level, it's seen as the highest form of elitism. It's a kind of term of abuse. Something is a designer this or a designer that. And yet, so it's straddled from both ends, but it's function. Design is fundamentally problem solving. Even abstract design thinking is problem solving. Art is not, unless the artist sets a problem for him or herself. And your conflation of things in museums, we need to knock out the park. It doesn't matter if someone buys a rare table for millions of pounds and displays it alongside works of art. Brilliant. But it's the same with holy relics. There was a dinosaur sculpture, literally a dinosaur sculpture sold at Frieze Masters 3 years ago for $1 million. It's not a work of art, but it was sold and displayed in the same context because that's the market, that's human beings' desires for collection, it's for display and contemplation. It's wonderful, but it's not a work of art.
So yeah, you're just saying, it's just like, you're being Marcel Duchamp. I guess it's all based on context.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to our next guest, Cloe Piccoli. Cloe is a prominent Milanese or Milan-based writer and curator. Chloe, what do you think of this discussion we're having here? I mean, what's art? What's design? Is it good? Is it bad? Or does it even matter? Does it matter?
It matters, yes. Thank you everybody. And you have already put on the table some very important concepts. Stefano, about the symbolic theme, about the intention and the contest, and you quoted Marcel Duchamp that I wanted to quote as well, because that is the beginning of everything at the very end. I want to tell something. In my opinion, the point is the object nowadays. That means that both in art and design, the object is not anymore that important. I mean, it is important, but it's not the only medium. Beside the object, there are many languages and media that go much farther than the object. And I'm talking about action, performances, environment, and processes. So artists and designers are working, are working also with these tools, these media.
Yeah, like art and design are not object-based. You were saying we have performance, we have all kinds of immaterial art and design.
Yes, definitely. And this is something that is similar in languages, and it's an area where art and design are blurring, overlapping. That creates a situation that is much more interesting. But at the end, I agree what I've been told before me, that art is very different from design. What is that makes different those two areas? But for sure the intention, the work itself, the nature of the work, I would say, and the context. The context means museums, galleries, critica, magazines, market, but I don't want to talk about market and the context because this could be the topic of another panel.
Yeah, but when we had a little exchange beforehand, you were saying that we have to be more open-minded about these things and not be so bothered about distinctions and walls and this is art and this is design and the two shall not mix, right? You're saying
Yes.
we live in a world where kind of the boundaries are fluid.
Yes, Farah. In fact, we were talking about that, and I thought that I don't think there is a precise formula, a rigid framework to say this is art and this is design, because this is an attitude of the 19th century that makes me think of Benedetto Croce, that was a philosopher, a very good one, but very from his age, and nowadays it's different. So at the end, the point is, I would like to leave you with this. Each identity is unique and peculiar and has his own path to arrive there. And if I can make a couple of examples quickly, shall I?
Yes, please.
I wanted to quote, for instance, Rilke Tiravanija, that has a beautiful exhibition at the moment in Pirelli Hangar Bicocca. Yes. He's not using object, or he's using object, but the object are tools to create dynamic, to involve participation, to involve audience, public, people. So at the end, the work of Tiravanija is not much about the object, but is much about the relationship. So it's not the object anymore. Let's talk about a duo of designers. I want to quote Forma Fantasma. And Forma Fantasma, they are working for companies. They are doing amazing lamps for floss. They are working as a curator. They are doing Prada frames, and that is a series of conversations. They have exhibited in important art institutions like the Serpentine Galleries, like Fondazione Ica in Milano, and now they have an exhibition at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And are they artists? Because they are, since they are exhibiting in art museums. No, they are not artists. They themselves, they say on their website that they are a studio of design. And so,
okay.
Tim, again, the intention, they know what they are and what they want to be.
Okay, great. I think, thanks for putting me in my place and telling me that basically this is a very 19th century debate we're having. What is art and what is design? It's all very old-fashioned. You're right, it is old-fashioned. But, you know, we're throwing the question out. I think before we move on to questions, and we would really like to hear from you because our talks are only as good as audience interaction with us. I wanted to basically move on to see a few slides from our friend Cris Levine. Cris, welcome. Cris is the only artist in the panel, and here is his probably, I think we could say, his most famous work. And Cris was writing to me earlier on, we were having exchanges, and he said to me, well, I started out in life as a designer of light works, professional designer of holograms and light-related, light-based works and products and objects. And then I transitioned into becoming an artist, and Queen Elizabeth II was how Cris made his transition. Now, Cris, can you please tell me the story of how the late Queen allowed you to transition from design into art. Let's stay on the Queen image if we could. Just keep this image.
Sure, thank you, and thanks for inviting me. I mean, I wondered, first of all, why me? What have I got to say? But then I realized I had a monograph about my work published last year, and there was a chapter, designer to artist, and it's definitely my story. But at art school, I did graphics at Chelsea and St. Martin's, and I kind of stumbled into graphics. It could have been, I actually wanted to be an architect, but 7 years, my father had just died, and in 3 years, I'm going to art school and have a good time. I went to, so doing graphics, and then started exploring holographics, and realized that actually, and really knowing this is something of a calling, I wanted to get involved in this, but it's a very expensive medium. The only way I was going to develop it as a new visual language, as an art form, was whether somehow I needed to have the resources to really work with it at an advanced level. So I had to go out and design holograms. You know, my card was holographic designer, you know, can't have been many holographic designers, but I was working, you know, with some of the best technical facilities, and, you know, exploring it, you know, what the potential of this, you know, new art form using light. But then, you know, the corporate world, and having to, you know, it was always working to brief, and, you know, but that's how I developed my, the language, was by working on commercial projects, you know, with the best holography and the best my precondition was I only want to work to the highest level. So
and you
straight out of art
didn't really
school.
like working for these companies for which you were creating holograms, right?
Yeah, and they had to function. They had to say something. They had to perform a function, you know. And I realized I got to a point where now, when I was commissioned to do the portrait of the Queen, I was a wild card in a selection that the curator appointed, 5 household names, and Cris, who might take it into the future. And I got the gig, and I wasn't going to design a portrait of the Queen or design an image of the Queen. I wanted to connect with the Queen. I wanted to create and channel something. And I think for me, my journey has been, my spiritual journey has been like I transitioned from designer to artist, and it's more really about not what the work does, but more how it makes you feel. And,
can we take a little break from the art and design argument or debate, and get you to tell us a little story about your meeting with the Queen, because we all want to know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I got the call out the blue, and I thought someone was pulling my leg. In fact, I thought I knew exactly who it was.
And
I went
please
along
speak
with it.
louder into the microphone.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I thought it was a friend of mine pulling my leg until I was summoned to a meeting at the National Portrait Gallery for the director, and realized this is for real. It was to mark 800 years since the island of Jersey broke away from France, pledged allegiance to the crown, and they wanted to mark that with a modern portrait. And as I said, there were some household names, and there was Cris, and it was working with light and holograms, and the Queen was tickled by the idea of having a hologram portrait made of her.
So she chose you?
She made the final decision, that's right.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing,
Yeah.
Cris. Wow, a round of applause.
And I had two sittings with her. It was only ever going to be one sitting. You know, she left the room. It'd been in the diary for 3 years. She left the room, and it was in the can. I knew I had 6 months now to work with the material.
No. Go back. What was it like being in the room with the Queen? Come on, tell us.
It was surreal, because I got to style her. I got to go through her wardrobe, chose what she wore. And when she turned up on the day wearing the dress that I'd been holding up with Angela going, yeah, I think this is the one. And then the next thing, you're standing in front of the Queen of England, wearing that dress and the one line of pearls that I selected. I chose the earrings.
And the crown, right?
And the crown.
You chose the crown, right?
I did, absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, a little story there was that on the morning we were setting, 3 o'clock, she was coming to do the sitting in the yellow drawing room, which I chose because it all had nice natural light, but I blacked it all out. It was a lot of technology in there, but I got an internal call to say, actually, there'd been some oversight. George Bush was staying at the palace. Security had never been tighter. Did I really need the crown? It was a logistics thing to get it from next door, the Royal Collection. Did I really need it? And the Englishman in me nearly went, oh, no, fine. Then something in me went, actually, yeah, I do need it. And so with that, Angela Kelly, her assistant, literally went next door, brought it over, and apparently the Queen had said, if he wants the crown, he shall have the crown.
Did she say?
It kind of makes the image, so I'm pretty pleased about that.
It's a fabulous image. You know, she looks very peaceful with her eyes closed there. It really is one of the star portraits at the Portrait Gallery, which I've seen many times because I live in London. We've all seen it. So wonderful, wonderful, Cris. And so, did she say anything to you? I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a gossip. I just want to know.
Yeah, well, she gave me a second sitting. So I was laying down on the floor when she left the room, that hallelujah, you've done it. And one of her aides comes back in and said, ma'am, I'd enjoyed that. If you'd like another sitting, you just have to write. I mean, I literally got up off the ground, dusted myself down. And so the second sitting is when it all happened. You know, the first sitting she was quite hard to engage with. We just met, you know, and it was quite an unusual, you know, production. But the second sitting, it was a kind of magic. And when she put on the ermine, because I asked for a selection of capes, because I knew I could change the look very quickly without changing the lighting and everything, selection of capes.
And I think you asked her to rest at one point. You said, Your Majesty, take a break, or however you said it.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
And then she closed her eyes, and then you kept it.
Yeah, because the 3D camera took quite a while to do the pass, and it had to reset. And I imagine there was a lot of light onto ma'am. And I said, if you'd like to rest in between shots, ma'am, that'd be fine. So she closed her eyes, and that was the moment. And that's not the official portrait. The official portrait is on the cover of Time magazine. It's in a castle in Jersey. She's got eyes are open. She's looking right through you, actually. Whereas this one is the one that really resonated because it operates on a spiritual dimension. You might not be, you know, into the monarchy, or you might, but that somehow goes deeper, beyond the physical. And my work is about frequency and vibration.
Yeah. And I think it marks the transition from designer to artist. So I think it's great to have you in this panel as the embodiment of our debate. Thank you very much, Cris. Do we have any questions? It would be really wonderful to hear from you here in the room. If there are any questions, curiosities, please don't be shy because we're doing all the talking. It's not easy, and we'd like to hear from you. Do we have any questions whatsoever? No. Okay. I think, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
What's interesting is what Cris has said is, and we're not lambing into you for your debate, it was a provocative title, but the interesting thing is what can design learn from art and what can art learn from design? And that symbiosis, that questioning, that is interesting. So Cris doing a royal portrait in the same way that Holbein doing a royal portrait is involved in a process of designing a notion of power. So that's why he has the choice of wardrobe. I mean, in less so power, you wanted texture and so on. And that conversation's ongoing. You know, we've just looked at The Last Supper with Chiara this afternoon in Milan here. And that is a triumph of art and human imagination, and it's a failure of design. The fact it was a north-facing wall and there was a stream underneath is a failure of design on behalf of the artist, who may not have cared. And in fact, Leonardo is a classic example of boundary blurring and didn't define himself as artist or architect or designer. He was all those things and more. He was not a scientist. I mean, he was a scientist, but he wouldn't have used those terms. And that's interesting, but it doesn't undermine the fundamental proposition that it's about intentionality and so on. But there is a conversation between the two, and people, the languages of creative process are interesting, and that's where the two disciplines, that's where the blurring is interesting, and it's where Enzo Mari being a brilliant and classic case in point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I still think that, I mean, it's a question I'm asking, but I want to ask Stefano. I mean, this notion of no work that started out with the intentionality of being a work of design can actually be a work of art. I mean, there are extraordinary buildings created by some of the greatest architects of our time, and you know them better than I do, that objectively now are perceived, are they not, as works of art? Can design, when it becomes something extraordinary, not cross over into art?
Let me a little bit go back to what Tim was saying. I think that if we try to a little bit go deeper in this notion of intentionality, you know, it's really the point for me. It's not simply the issue is not simply that we want to become artists. So my intention is to. And what I'm saying is that basically when we start in this way, we are basically entered to a failure, to a flop. The point is another. It's if we want to, let's say, explicit an intentional relation between content and form, That's another very important issue, in my opinion. So let's just, to give an example, switch to music, which is another field which is very close to our discipline from many points of view. We are used to say that every music composer, every music author is an artist. Well, okay, but if we just remind me an example, if we go back to the 60s and how John Baez and Bob Dylan at the beginning, they were working together. They were part of the same family. They were participating at the same political events. But from a certain moment, Dylan decided to abandon that way to put in connection content and form. And what's happening is that John Baez continuing to follow that linear, intentional relation between the two. And well, she produced We Shall Overcome. Dylan decided to cut this logical linearity and to, let's say, abandon this intentional relation between the two. And like a Rolling Stone is art. We Shall Overcome is not art.
Gosh.
They are both artists. And
You're being a bit harsh.
This is a point. This is a point for me. And it's true that, well, we could be artists or just for one day, but okay.
Okay, great. Do we have any questions, any comments, anything, any commentary from... You are a very quiet group. Un po' di domande, ragazzi. Yes, Chloe, I wanted to turn to you. Please, go ahead. Please.
Stefano before quoted Enzo Mari like an architect that is a kind of artist in some moment, and I wanted in my notes, I had Andrea Branzi, that at the moment there is an exhibition, a beautiful exhibition at La Triennale about Andrea Branzi. If you read the biography of Andrea, it's written architect, artist, designer, theoretician, and a professor. And back to that, at the Triennale you can see beautiful objects, small installations, sculptures, but especially big environment. That was the part that stuck me more of the exhibition. So again, it's true that there are personalities and moments in the history where the two areas are blurring and overlapping, but still, I don't know, Stefano, what you think about, but maybe Andrea Branzi still is an architect. And back to the 60s, when he was closer to Architettura Radicale, they consider architecture like a tool to change the world. That means that would have touched all the realms of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I will pass over to you, Tim, but like the Church of San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice, it's a work of architecture, but it's also a masterpiece, work of art.
But it's not a work of art. Why
is it not a work of art?
Because it's a work of architecture. Why do we have to? What status undermining is it to say that it's one of the most beautiful buildings in the world, but it's not a work of art? It contains works of art in it. It aspires, in some people's minds, yours clearly, to that of art. It has an effect on you, an affect on you, like a work of art, and that's wonderful. But we don't have to then reascribe its category as a work of art. It's a building. What's interesting about what you just said about Branzino, and think about Es Devlin, actually, and others, is this term multi-hyphenate. And that's how these people should be described. Es Devlin is a designer, hyphen artist, hyphen performer, hyphen commentator, and hyphen collector. And what's interesting is it's the multi-hyphenate that helps define them as this collection of practices, but they're still separated by the hyphen. So those individual disciplines exist, and that's fine. And some people like to play with them, and some people like to assume the responsibility and interest in all of them, and some people stick at one, and that's fine. That's often how creative people should be liberated or allowed to perform.
Thank you,
and it's
Tim.
interesting that sort of Ez is a stage designer who's now making more art. Picasso is presumably, you agree, he's an artist, but he did stage design, he worked with Diaghilev, but it didn't mean that what he produced on stage, that the whole ballet became something different. It was just a brilliant conversation between two art forms that took it to another realm.
Okay, I mean, you know, the definition of art is endless. But so, I think we're going to be, I guess, please go ahead. You have a question. If you could introduce yourself kindly and let us know.
With a microphone from Boeri, it's very difficult to say anything, but you know. So I took some notes because
Can I get your name?
Yeah, sorry. My name is Chiara Orlandini, and I mean, I have a lot of iPhones myself as well, but I'm here as an art collector. So, and obviously, upon the invitation of my dear friend, we'd manage Yes Milano, which is one of the best institutions taking care of the art in town. So I agree with a lot of what you said about medium, about price, about location. None of that makes art or design because those are fungible, price, location, and everything. But as an art collector, and I'm not going to disclose my very young age, but I'm collecting since 25 years, what I'm saying, what I'm looking for when I buy are three things, which are, is this object iconic? Is this object functionless? And does it convey emotions beyond the medium and beyond time? These are the three non-negotiables that every single piece of art I buy needs to have. And I also have a lot of design in my house. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't change. It's non-flexible on price. It's non-flexible on my pleasure in having that, but it's not art, and it's not part of my art collection.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very interesting. So to wrap things up, I think we would just want to go back to Cris, because Cris has, I guess it's an artwork. It's definitely a work of art that you're about to launch at the Venice Biennale. If you're at the Venice Biennale, everybody in Venice will see a work that Cris is creating. And so to end this, I thought we would get Cris to talk about that work. Cris, please go ahead.
Well, we were going to do it guerrilla style, so no one's really supposed to know about it, actually. But
Oh, sorry.
here we go. The word is out, and no, you won't miss it. So, you know, I've been working with lasers a long time, but I've been developing with some engineers in Germany. We've modified a military specification.
Never talked to a journalist before a panel.
The sky is my canvas. I've been talking a long time. I want to take my work into a cosmic scale, light traveling at 186,000 miles per second. Is the universe getting bigger and bigger? But this laser is, I've seen it cut through steel inch thick this quickly. And it's a next level bit of kit. So we're basically, tests we did last year in Germany were spotted by the International Space Station, 250 miles up in space. And this is a laser that when we did tests, a cloud came over, it diffused the light, the whole town lit up green. So basically I'm projecting a halo over Venice for a week, and it's an experimental work. I can't wait to do it because I want to, you know, yeah, this is what I do, you know, it turns me on, then I think it turns my audience on. But light is fundamental to everything. You know, we're projecting very pure frequencies. Lasers are single frequencies of light. We don't normally experience that. So very quickly, it can get you into a meditative state. And if you can do that with a large audience in the world that we're living in now, then, you know, make light, not war.
So I'm sorry to spill the beans, but now that they're spilled, basically Cris is going to be having a work that any of you go to the Venice Biennale Vernissage Week between the 4th and the 8th of May.
Just look in the sky.
Look up in the sky and you will see Chris's work. So it's a wonderful way for me to close this panel and thank my absolutely fantastic and stellar speakers. Thank you so much. And if I may ask you just to bear with me 5 minutes, and may I invite the great Otobongn and Kanga to join me on stage. Thank you so much. You're sitting there. I think Mike is like. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to these Art for Tomorrow talks at the Milan Art Fair, and thank you very much for being here. It is a true honor for me to be here on stage, finally, I should say. I've been waiting years to be alone with Otobongn on stage. We've been on stage, but not alone before, with Otobongn and Kanga. Otobongn was, as many of you know, born in Nigeria. She was educated in France at the Beaux-Arts in Paris, among other places. She's educated at the Netherlands, and she now lives in Antwerp, Belgium. So she's sort of like a walking United Nations.
Ooh, that's intense.
Otobongn is one of the great contemporary artists of our time, and she has been in the global spotlight very, very especially in the last couple of years. If I could ask everyone to sort of pay attention and keep conversation down, because we need to focus on this great artist we have the privilege of hosting. She is the laureate of the 2025 Nasher Prize, which is one of the art world's highest accolades. She just had a major exhibition, some of you saw, at the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris, which I saw, and it was absolutely splendid. Recently ended, and until June of last year, she had a monumental installation in the atrium of MoMA in New York, which I hope we can see, yes we can, on the screen right behind me. The work that you see behind me is called, this is a very important work, and I'm gonna stand up and ask you all to pay very close attention, because for me, this is a masterpiece. Even though I have never actually seen the work itself, I've only seen a fragment of it. But this is a monumental work. It is, what is the measurements? It's
60 feet, about 18 meters high.
It's 18 meters high.
10 meters, 10 and a half meters wide.
Yeah, so you can picture the impact this had in the foyer, in the atrium of MoMA. And I'm going to sort of talk about it, even though I'm not the artist, but I've listened to the artist talk about it. So Cadence is, I think, and I would say, a life and death work. It evokes through tapestry, sculpture, because there's sculpture that goes with it, and sound, the notion of the fall, a tear dropping, the cadence at which a tear drops, and how we are all somehow inevitably, as living beings, in a kind of free fall. Sorrow and pain are emotions that all of us human beings experience. Nobody gets a free pass. It's sad but true. And there are experiences that Otobongn, as a human being amongst us all, had from a young age. By her early 20s, I believe, she had sadly lost both parents. And this loss is something that she constantly speaks about carrying with her. This feeling of loss and emptiness, and somehow this work that you see here, which I'm so sad we're not seeing the real thing, represents the world of Otobongn, but it's also the world that we all live in. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, a work that was in which, you know, you can see how we were unified by the experience of loss and grief. This is a world of war, death, decay, of mineral extraction and environmental destruction. But it's also a world of rebirth, a world of glimmers of hope, a world of occasional repair. So before I turn to Otobongn, who will correct me if I said something stupid about her work, I wanted to just basically repeat some of the things that Otobongn gave explanations. She said, for instance, that these shrubs that you see at the bottom here, they look like, plants or attractive, forms of nature. They are actually fungus, and they represent decay. So this bottom half here, this bottom part here. And this man and woman whose back are turned to us, who are then one notch above, they look like an idyllic couple, but they are actually staring into, I think, a mine or wasteland. And as we go up, we see these scenes that could be scenes of light and scenes of hope, but they are also scenes of cataclysm. As we move up towards the top of the painting, we see melting, we see extreme heat. So, Otobongn. I sit back down because I got a little theatrical with this work. Otobongn, if I talked a lot of gobbledygook about your work, please correct me. Tell us here now what your feelings are. I don't really want you to go into details about technicalities, not interested. Not interested in what this means, this is and that is. Your feelings and your emotions that you are expressing with cadence.
First of all, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you for having me. I would also like to thank the whole team for having me, the city of Milan. First of all, I think I have to talk about the painting that I went to see earlier on of Michelangelo and of Leonardo.
The Last Supper.
The Last Supper.
Of Leonardo da Vinci.
Of Leonardo, yeah. I'm thinking of Michelangelo, I don't know why. And it's just amazing to be able to be in the presence of a work that has lasted for so many years, so many centuries, and to see that privilege we have today to be able to see a work that touches us. And I was just thinking about that and the emotion of imagining that this space has been bombed, destroyed, put together again, and we're seeing in the whole world the destructions and the debris and things we will never see, things that our children and the future generation will never see, and we've had the privilege to see. And we realize that we are in front of something that is incredible, because not everything that we get to see today or everything that we experience today, we realize that we cannot take it for granted. It can be gone tomorrow. And just standing there, looking at it, looking at the city of Milan, passing through, seeing the fort, looking at places of structures for war and for protection, I think brings me back to that notion of cadence of, when I was making the work, the emotions I had were emotions that were connected to times where I remember then in Italy, watching the news, you're listening to the amount of people dying every day. It was like a death count. And you also heard in America, people dying. And today, it seems like we never had time to understand what that meant, to understand the emptiness that was left behind. And so when I was invited to do this work in New York, I felt it was very important to make a work that relates to emotions. How can one make a work that is deeply not tangible, but deeply emotional?
Wonderful. Well, you've really succeeded. Otobongn, I'm always interested in finding out about artists' childhoods and their formative years and how they turn them into the person and the artist that they are. And when you were a child, you moved with your mother and family to UNESCO, to Paris, because she got a job at UNESCO. And so for a number of years you were there, and then you went back to Nigeria, and then your mother was an educator, she was teaching, but she was also working with batik. So she was making beautiful batik designs, and you were a little girl then, or maybe a teenager, but you were helping your mother with these batik designs. And I wondered, how much did that experience of working with batik with your mother, helping her with those batik fabrics, how much did that really inform the artist you are today and your artistic practice, which does involve textile tapestry design?
I'm getting there.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to.
it's okay. I'm just having a flashback of working, and I remember as a teenager, we came back from Paris, and my mom was posted to one of the towns and cities out of Lagos, out of the main city, into a very, farming Shagamu. It's really a dead end somehow. And it was a kind of punishment, in a way. But she wasn't paid salary for a whole year. And she had 4 kids. And so I think what I learned from my mother was that you have to be extremely industrious, at the same time imaginative, because if the government that you're working with, the federal government, does not pay salary, then at one point in time, she was like, we would travel all the way to Lagos, which was about 300 kilometers to Lagos, and she was learning how to make batik. And I would follow her, and we would go and meet with this man that would show us how the temperature of the wax, the colors, how to dye, all that. And I feel that really helped me in the future to really understand material, in the sense that we would go to Otobongn, which was a certain area in Lagos, quite rough. And we would go through the market to find all the dyes, to find the kind of materials, so to know what is synthetic, what is cotton, what is organic materials. And with that, it allowed me to know how to heal and to understand what yarns are, what materials are, and also to understand the way of dealing with chemicals, the way of dealing with colors, the notion of temperature. And my mother gave me the task to draw with wax on this brocade cotton materials. So with that, I had a knowledge without actually going to school for it. I had a knowledge of how to understand that actually the alchemy of things make things happen. And not only the alchemy of things, but also the way to be innovative, reflective, and to do a lot of experiment before you get to something that you feel you can bring out into the world.
How interesting. I think it was also your mother who almost kind of gave you permission to be an artist, because you were a young girl, or maybe teenage girl, and you wanted to be an artist, but you just didn't know how, because there were no role models. You didn't see women artists around you at that time where you were living, and your mother sort of gave you the permission. She said, go and be an artist and be free. And I want to know why you are an artist. That's a really big question. I realize it's, but why are you an artist?
I will start from a place of confusion, first of all. And I think it's the same question you were asking about design and art. And I have a lot of desire for many things. I was very good at sports. I loved running, very good at it. I love singing. Oh my God.
Me too.
So I was, you know, you're a teenager and you're looking at the perspectives, like, and I remember saying to myself also that if I was a singer, my voice, oh my God, what if I wake up and it disappears? You have to have a certain discipline, eliminate. Then I'm like, okay, if I was an athlete, my body, something happens, eliminate. Then, you know, this discussion of like being very pragmatic, putting things out and wondering, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I enjoy this. And then I had, you know, conversations with my mother. And at one point in time, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to be an architect. And then my mother turned around, she looked at me and she said, well, you know, for me, you have to do exactly what you love. It doesn't matter if it will be functionable or you would make money or whatever it is. She just said, the passion will put you through. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then she said also that she dreamt of me in colors. And then she said, you know, you can do everything in art. And that was the moment everything clicked, because I said, well, does it mean I can do architecture in art? She said, yes, you can do biology, you can do everything in art. And that's the moment it was like, well, maybe that's what I'm going to do. I'll be an artist. And I never doubted it. It wasn't a question of like, am I an artist or not? It was the moment that it made sense that everything I was interested in, that means like from sports to singing to architecture to everything I was interested in, I had to find a way to bring it in when I was interested in it, and when I wasn't, there are other things I'm interested in, and art could be the platform for that. And that was my definition of art. It wasn't in a classical way but it was in relation to how and what I want to put out in the world.
That's great. Fantastic. I knew you were going to be a compelling speaker, and now it's confirmed my impression. You have said everything comes from nature, even if we're holding a cup. But every natural resource seems to be cheaper than what is processed. And that affects, of course, different landscapes, different people, different economies. Places that have raw materials are places of extraction, and there is no repair in any way. And of course, we all understand what is referred to by that. You could well be describing several continents, but I think among others, the continent of Africa. What I want to ask you is that your work manages to be both personal and in some ways political, because you denounce the centuries-old extraction, colonial and post-colonial exploitation of continents and of peoples and of territories and of resources, and you cry out against ecological ravage. Sometimes for an artist, I was wondering if it can be a little hard to be engagé. In other words, there's a danger that art can turn into propaganda, that art can turn into pamphleteering. How do you manage to achieve this sort of harmonious, as we saw in Cadence, language where you're creating a beautiful work of art in which you're touching on subjects that are very personal, but subjects that are also very political, I can say, socio-political, geopolitical? How do you do it?
I think it's a question of understanding the stratas and the nuances, the gray zones, the dark zones, there are many zones in which we are working in. And I think it's getting more and more apparent that the world we are in, I mean, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, to be able to talk about the subjects we're talking about, to be able to actually see in real time what is happening in the world, it wasn't possible 20 years ago. And I think that the understanding of being in different worlds, living in different worlds, understanding the injustices, some things are so blatant, but we also have to understand that many people and different people have different experiences, come from different worlds, have different privileges, and it's to understand and have the empathy and to understand that what I'm doing is my own passage in the world and how I see things. But that doesn't mean that you or you or you have the same point of view as I do. So, and that is not so important. I think what is important is how we meet. And for me, the artwork is the meeting point. It's the place where my thoughts, my imaginary, the creativity, the reflection on material, on place, on ecology, on emotions, how do I tie that together to open a portal in which we can meet? And for me, that's the most important thing. It's not necessarily to preach and to say this is right or this is wrong, but it's the possibility of that meeting. And when you really meet someone, you really start with a conversation. You start with like understanding. Maybe you do not like me. Maybe you do not like what I look like, my color, my skin. I don't care. But what I want is to understand where are our brains meeting to be able to have a conversation about maybe not about what we look like, but what can we do in this world? What are we here for? What are we working towards? What are we building for the next generation? And so for me, it's not, then certain questions are thrown out of the window, but the way of thinking about how to be able to touch in different ways. I think of the senses. If I'm feeling something, the smell, how things smell, the texture of a thing, if it feels a bit rough. And with that, you can now start thinking of how do you layer the work with all these different senses that can evoke different ways of feeling alive in a space.
And those are universal feelings because we are all human. We're all
Totally.
living in this same planet.
Yeah,
Right. We're not.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you what it's like for you to be straddling many different worlds and continents, because we saw work that was showing at MoMA. You won the Nasher, which is an American prize. You were at Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris, and you will be showing, although we can't.
No, we can. I'll be showing in Venice.
You'll be showing in Venice in the Giardini in the central exhibition. You're not giving details yet. I tried to get them out of you before, but you weren't giving them. So.
I know the journalist.
So, you're kind of everywhere, and in a way, and you're based in Antwerp, Belgium, which is a really great city, very, very open and,
Well-
fantastic. Well, I mean, at least
A beautiful city.
design-wise and architecture, whatever, fashion and all that. But do you ever think about going back to Africa, or going back to Nigeria, or going back to the country where you were, I guess, born, and resettling there permanently? Because as we move on and through life, we do wonder about going back to roots and things. I don't want to make this about me, and I certainly don't want to go back to the Iran of today. I would go straight to prison. But I kind of wonder, gosh, what would it be like if I actually managed to revisit my country? Anyway, to go back to you.
Yeah, I think the places we come from, or the places of our childhood, the places that have fed us, the first places of, energy, where you get to learn a language, where your mother, your father comes from, is always a place of quest and wondering how, what. And I have all my family living in Nigeria, so none of them wanted to come to Europe. I came to Europe by mistake, let's say. And I stayed in Europe, but Nigeria, and going back to Nigeria, I do that constantly because the whole family is there. And I remember the project I did with Documenta in 2017, with the soap project that we sold 15,000 soaps, in which the money then opened a foundation in Nigeria. And we also have an art space in Athens. So with that, I go back every year. We have a farm, and we work a lot with local people and things like that, and establishing a place that will gradually be a place that there could be engagement with art. But as of now, we're really working with soil, plant, food, a lot of like thinking around food security, water, light, energy. And so my relationship with Nigeria is always constant. And last year I was there for 2.5 months, even though it was quite busy. And this year, hopefully also to go back to the farm a bit and be in Nigeria. But it's not something you lose. The umbilical cord is still there. But it's also a place where you feel the tension, you feel you feel certain things that you want to work against. But being in different worlds, I think that's what's actually very interesting, because by being in different worlds, you actually see what connects us. You see, you meet people that are very human, people that care in between the passages as you walk through space. And being in Europe would not have been possible without the people that I met here, that made it possible for me to study, that made it possible for me to, that were my safety nets. And so the worlds that I walk through, I'm looking at things that are actually connecting us. And through those things, I'm able to engage and to feel safe in those places.
Otobongn, you are one of, as I said, one of the really prominent contemporary artists of our time, and you are represented by, you know, some of really the great galleries of this world, art galleries, and you are part of this thing called the art market, and, you know, which has its pluses and minuses, if I may. How do you feel about the art market, the auctions, the whole inflation of prices around certain artists, and the ignorance of or oblivion in which other artists exist? You know, how do you feel about this?
I think the market has always been there in relation to art. So even if we're looking at the painting of Leonardo da Vinci, he was commissioned. There was a lot of money behind him. There were many artists that were not, they might be good, but they never had that possibility to be visible in the way that certain artists are. I think it's just the way the design and the structure in which it's not a world of parity. It isn't. I come from a place, you know, if we think of Nigeria, if we think of different parts of the world, if we think of certain, we're not in a world that is equal. The design in which the ideologies and the economies, the way they're structures, is not a structure of equality. The way the oligarchs have also set up the design for making products is not a place of equality. It's always been a place of labor and some people profiting from that labor. Now, for me, it's like I am in this world that produces this kind of schema. Then, as an artist, my question is, if I'm able to get a certain amount of money, if I'm able to get a certain amount of visibility, I think the question is, what do you do with it?
What do you do?
What do you do with that capacity? What do you do with that economy? And that, for me, is the place of working. What do you do with the voice you have? What do you do with all the little privileges that you're able to grab from this big entity? That little place you are in is still a place of power. And that little power you have, what do you do with it? And that's what I'm interested in. Because the world in which we live in, and I think not from the time of, you know, the caveman to the future, will never be a place of equality.
Wow. Do we have one or two questions from the room? Okay. Great. I wondered if we could, because I think we have, what, 4 more minutes. Unfortunately, this is too short, this conversation. I want to go on because I really enjoy talking to you. I don't know about the audience, but I'm having a great time up here.
I can add something to that last part of like never a place of equality. But I think that when we start asking the questions of how are we going to do, How can we change certain things? When you have a group and a number of people working towards something, we get closer to a place where the possibilities of privileges can become a bit more balanced. And I think that's important to say, not to end it at a place that is so negative. But I see with different regimes, you know, we can look at different times in the world, different political regimes that went up and down, but you had also groups of people being pockets of resistance, being pockets of changing things. And sometimes we lose the fact that we have that possibility of doing it because we seem so fragmented, so truncated. But we can actually find a way that little by little, there are things one can do to reassure and to replace that place of deep negativity to something that can be positive. And it's just a little action. It doesn't mean that we always think we have to change things in a big way, but a big number of us, we're 8 billion on this planet, just by a little gesture, it can give us, uplift a bit of something.
Yeah, because it was a bit of a sobering, diagnosis, this business of, there will always be inequality. We are striving through democracy as much as we can and as easily as we can or not. We are striving for equality. We are striving for being more egalitarian societies. And it's great to hear you give us some sense of hope, because if all we see ahead of us is inequality forever, that is a little disheartening. So thank you for giving us that note of hope. Otobongn, I did want to conclude this wonderful conversation to ask you about a friend of yours, a close friend, Koyo Kuo. The first time that I met Otobongn was in a panel discussion that I was moderating at Art Basel, and it was basically about organized by the landscape designer Enzo Enea, and we were talking about environment, and Enzo was speaking and Otobongn was speaking. That's when I first met Otobongn, and we connected immediately, and we said, when can we talk and when can we, etc. And so finally this has happened. So I'm very happy about that. But also present that evening was someone I had also had in a panel discussion, and it was a lot harder than having Otobongn in a panel, which was Koyo Kuo. And Koyo was a very close friend of Otobongn. But when I was talking to Otobongn, or whoever I was talking to, Koyo would be in the second row chatting. She would be chatting. And I would be like, I would sort of look at Otobongn, look at Koyo, and sort of say, just as I was doing earlier, could I ask you please to pay attention to Otobongn and Kanga? She's saying important. Made no difference. Koyo was chatting throughout the whole panel, and I had to live with it, and it was very distracting. But I also had dinner with her. did a panel with her, and she was extraordinary, and from what I knew of her. So I wanted you, because she unfortunately has left us, and she is the artistic director of this year's Venice Art Biennale, I wanted you to leave us with a few words of, remembering Koyo Kuo.
Yeah. We had plans, and you sit down, and I remember the first time she mentioned to me, we were in Cape Town, and she was there with one of the curators that were working with her, and she said, I have something to ask you, clear your agenda.
That was an order.
That was an order, clear your agenda. I'm like, no, Koyo, I don't know what you're going to ask me. No. And she was like, well, I want you to be part of the Venice Biennale. That was February 2025. And then she told me specifically where I will be showing. She told me, she gave orders, like, you will do this and you'll do that. You'll do this and you'll be here. And I was like, okay. And I hadn't yet said yes, but it was already done for her. And that's why she told me to clear the agenda. But she also said something very important, which was, I want to have the artist, and I'm inviting artists I want to have dialogues with. I want to and see how they work. I want to, it's not just an exhibition, it's not just Venice. It's really to see how this conversation that we've started in many places with many artists, how we can continue that during this period. And for her, it was like, I'm interested in artists that I care about the work. I want to see the work grow. And so I, at one point in time, I said, yes, I will do it. And I was just looking at my agenda to see how to negotiate that. And we kept in touch. She came to Dallas when I got my prize in April. And then she passed away in May. And we've known each other for a very long time, since 1999. Before she was even a curator, that conversation. And then I've seen her grow. I've seen her work, and the exhibitions, I've been in some of them. So this was a moment that we could have all had with many artists that I cherish, that I love. And I will be seeing them at the Biennale, and we will have her in our hearts. And as she said, we don't die, we go through a transformation. So this is the transformation, and yeah.
Thank you so much. Before I hand over to Fiorenza, are you difficult? No, don't worry, it won't be difficult. I just wanted you to tell us, pitching forward, what are you striving for as an artist? I know I'm asking these impossible questions, but so what is ahead for you? What are your unrealized projects or things that you'd like to do?
I've been asked that a few times, my unrealized projects, but I believe that I should be realizing them. So I'm in the process of realizing them. The arts work and the farm in Nigeria, the projects that I've done, that I'm doing, the ideas. I think it's just to be able to develop, to experiment, and to have the possibility to still reflect. I don't have an unrealized projects, but I have desires. And those desires are not one thing, they're many. Yeah.
That's good enough.
I would like to ask a question. What's your unrealized project? I want to know.
That's easy.
What is it?
I would like to write a memoir about my Iranian family, and somehow Otobongn and I are best friends, even though I've only seen her 3 or 4 times in my life. I wanted to thank you, Otobongn, for being just an extraordinary speaker and guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah, for having me.
May I ask Fiorenza to speak?
It's a very tough challenge after such an incredible speech, but I mean, I will cue from a line you gave us, and it's going to remain a fond memory among many fond memory related to the Art and Culture Foundation. I'll come back to it. You said art is a meeting point, and your heart is particularly good at showing it symbolically and not only symbolically. And you know, in our organization, Milano and Partners, Yes Milano, we promote the city and we try to bring here people, events, companies, talent in general. And when we do that, we think that our city, Milano, exactly in the same way, we are common ground. That's what we want to be. Cities as art can be meeting point. And this is difficult right now. It's not happening in too many cities in the world. And I think in Milano, Tommaso, I'm looking at you because that's something we discuss often. We take pride in this. We are an open city where diversity can be an antidote to the lack of equality. And we love diversity. We want diversity. We try to keep being a diverse city. And I think this moment we share together are reminding us we can be successful in doing that. And so I'm grateful. And then just to dramatize a bit the conversation before going to our well-deserved aperitivo, let me say it's been a tremendous privilege to run Milano and Partners in these incredible 3 years for Milano. And I had the honor and the favor to listen to so many interesting conversations, including the Olympics. And I'm looking at Chiara Rostagno, which I thanks for bringing you at the Cenacolo and gifting you with such an incredible memory of our contemporary city, so contemporary also through Leonardo da Vinci work. We brought together Snoop Dogg at the Cenacolo, which is a peculiar personage. We saw our president welcoming the world. But maybe my favorite memory in these last 3 words will be from the last Arts for Tomorrow talks, when I saw another excellent Iranian woman, Shirin Nazar, having a conversation after the talks at the Lirico and signing autograph, but also being a fan and talking with young students who were there to enjoy listening to an artist, and other artists joined, and then it was a collecting conversation on a public piazza. And I think these I will bring with me for the rest of my life. And at the same time, I think when we go to Venice, yes, we get out from Milano from time to time and look at the Biennale. We'll cherish the memory we have built together this afternoon, and hopefully they stay for us and germinate and bring even more good memories, diversity, and next conversation to have together. So again, thank you also, because I know it hasn't been easy to join us. Thank you to Achilles who wasn't with us, and hopefully see you soon. And the aperitivo is in the Winter Garden, and you're also very welcome to give a look to the Aquario downstairs, which is, a Liberty jewel.